I'm going to touch on some less common pieces that not a lot of people will have. First one's going to be this device here. It's a Paranormal Music Box. It sounds creepy, and essentially what it is a motion sensor, but it's just a cool looking motion sensor. But it plays this creepy music anytime something crosses in front of it. This is a cool piece of equipment. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got our Zoom recorder, which this is how we'll get any of those EVPs or electronic voice phenomenon. This right here has only been out for about a month. It's called an Envoy. And the easiest way to describe this device is it's like a digital Ouija board. But what's interesting about it is it tests for electromagnetic fields, temperature variance, and touch. But there's nothing pre-programmed in it, which adds a level of transparency that a lot of these other devices don't have. So it'll actually tell you why it went off, but it's got 5 different modes: yes, no, numbers, emotions, and then just your standard information. This is an Ovulus. If you've ever watched a paranormal TV show, they'll either have this one or they'll have the older one. This device uses environmental conditions such as vibration, EMF, to name a few, but it essentially takes that data and it has a pre-programmed dictionary, and it spits out words based off of the readings that it obtains. This one's a really interesting piece of equipment too. I prefer this one, but this one is my runner-up in terms of intelligent communication devices. But both of these are a pretty rare piece of anyone's gear bag. This device here is called an EDI Plus, so it has a geophone built into it. So when we turn that on, it'll actually give us a temperature readout. It'll give us a vibration signification here that it's moving, and then it has an EMF sensor built in, and then temperature variance and pressure and humidity change as well. So a lot of these devices will give us data, but not all data is paranormal activity. I think that's where we get in trouble, is when something goes off, we're like, oh, it's paranormal activity, but there's a lot of different variables that go into whether it's activity or just something in the environment that's causing it to go off. So this bear right here, it looks like a standard teddy bear, but what's interesting about this bear is it actually has built-in phrases, and if something touches it, it lets me know. So once it turns on, every 10 seconds, it'll say something. This is really good for any like child spirits, because if they ever want to interact with him, this is usually a good one to put out. I can also put this in a room by itself with a camera, and sometimes you'll have stuff interact with it with me not being there. So whenever it moves, it says it's ticklish, signifying that something's touching it. So it's just a really cool piece of equipment to try and trigger a child spirit.
Thanks. I like holding him.
So he'll say phrases like, thanks for holding my hand, things like that. It's just supposed to be a little bit more inviting than sticking out any of these, because sometimes, you know, if I was a kid and I didn't know what this was, I might try and steer clear from this, thinking it might hurt me. This right here is another one of my favorite pieces of equipment. So it looks like Christmas lights, but when you turn this on, it's essentially like having 12 K2 meters, which a K2 meter measures electromagnetic fields. Now this is what your standard K2 looks like. Everyone's got a few of these, but you can actually lay these out on the ground, and anytime something sets this off, which this might do it, it'll actually flash this singular device, but the whole line will stay, will be unfazed unless the whole line gets activated. So this device is really cool to put in doorways or hallways, because it kind of catches a little bit of motion better than some of the other ones. These are 2 different types of spirit boxes. This is an S box, this is an SB11. The way these work is it essentially uses a sweep rate or sweeping ability through FM or AM frequencies. This one can do both. This one can only do one at a time. But you're essentially trying to create a white noise for an entity to manipulate into words. Now I usually pair this with a set of noise canceling headphones, and you can do something called the Estes method, where you essentially take somebody's hearing away, and sometimes people even blindfold people. So you're just saying what's coming through the headphones comparative to looking for an answer if we were to just play this. And it adds a little bit of transparency in the sense of you're not looking for answers, and it takes away a little bit of that bias. This is a RIM pod, and this essentially, the moment we turn this on, it sets a field around this antenna right here. The only thing I will caution you is if you have a walkie-talkie or anything that sends out a radio signal, you can actually trip these off without knowing it. So if you have a walkie-talkie, you could pop it. You can actually make this activate. So don't get confused with paranormal activity if you see that happen. But this device is just another piece to establish a point of communication. The whole objective of all of these pieces of equipment is to establish communication, whether that be through this $400 music box or this $30 K2 meter. It doesn't matter, but the emphasis is to establish communication, and not just it going off, but intelligence behind response. That's when it kind of perks my ears up to what's going on. If something is obeying commands and doing things on a cadence compared to just turning on. So people always ask me what the first thing to buy is whenever you're an investigator, and you don't really need any of this to go into these places and experience paranormal activity. This just gives you a visual cue that something could be around, but at the end of the day, your body, to me, is probably your best tool, because everyone's had that hair standing up in the back of the neck feeling. And I feel like our bodies are a lot more attuned to the environment around us than we think. And a lot of the response we have to electromagnetic fields is that hair on the back of your neck, that feeling of heaviness, that uncomfortableness. So don't feel like you have to spend thousands of dollars to get to the point where I'm at, where you're investigating places. You could literally go with your phone with a voice recorder and a flashlight and get better activity than I could ever get with all this stuff. So as a tip of advice, just if you're interested in this, go out there and start doing it, because you don't have to have this to be able to do this. It's just where I'm at. I've been able to acquire all this, but it's not needed for the field. So there is a common trend right now of people developing phone applications to hunt ghosts. When I first started, I would use one, and now I don't use any. And my reasoning is the moment that you have somebody making the application, it takes away that transparency and the ability for me to really entrust what I'm getting through there is paranormal activity and not just an app spitting out words. So if I can give you a word of caution, is steer clear of phone apps, because there's so much manipulation that can go into those, and you're better off just walking around with the audio recorder built into your phone, because that's not going to give you random words or draw figures or spit out nonsense. It'll give you a better basis to work off of compared to trusting an app that somebody made with the notion of marketing and monetizing ghost hunting. So I definitely would caution against the applications, because when you're in the business of making money doing this, you're obviously going to put out a product that's going to make you more money. So that's my biggest misconception, is I don't trust phone apps. Again, I'm not asking you to believe because I say so, but as somebody that does this week in and week out, I will not touch them anymore. I would much rather just have a recorder, and if we get anything, we get anything. If we don't get anything, then I'm not worried about it, because I can entrust that what this gives me is more authentic than a phone app.